That's a great idea, but there's no way I have time for that.
Welcome back to the Perfect RA podcast. I'm your co-host, Micah Shalansky, and with me, as usual, Matthew Jarvis. How's it going on, Jarvis?
Micah, doing good. We're coming up into Surge meeting. Of course, when this podcast airs in March, it will be in the
Mm-hmm.
middle of Surge. And Micah, what's really been fun is, of course, it's been Surge. March has been a Surge time for you and I for years,
Long
more
time.
years than I want to admit. But now we're talking to advisors all around the country, all around the world, who are also saying, "Hey, I can't do this or that during Surge or during March because that's my Surge time." So it's really fun seeing like the entire industry, or at least a segment of the industry, shifting to Surge meetings.
Jarvis, you're 100% correct, right? The beauty of this, not only for advisors' lifestyle, but for the client's benefit. And again, for those few of you who may be listening that aren't doing Surge, the reason we want to focus this around March is tax time,
Mhm.
right? It's great to give a clients a why to come in for their meetings. Why is it important to come in March? Great. I want to review your tax return before it's filed. Or if you don't want to do that, great. I want to review your tax return right after it's filed. It's the same compelling reason of why clients need to come in. So that gives them a reason, a date to be anchored around to come in that they allow to meet with you so you can add massive value to them. So that's the whole methodology behind, or thought process, I
Mhm.
should say, behind why we do surge meetings in March. And again, seeing this spread like wildfire through the industry is amazing. And I am so excited about so many lives that this is positively affecting.
Yeah, it really is. Now, if your surge isn't in March, in fact, Micah, for a while I ran my surges in May. The time of the year is not the critical factor here. Now,
Hmm.
March is a great time, and Micah, you just articulated several reasons why. The key here is being intentional with your time, using this timeless tool of time blocking. And Micah, that's what we want to dive into a little bit deeper today. Is this idea of, hey, I don't have time, or the I think the more dangerous one is someday I'll have time, right? I don't have time for that now, but someday I'll have time for it.
Yes, yes, and the way we could phrase that is not someday I'll. It's once I do X, then I'll do it. Once I get to this production level, then I'll do it. Once I bring on 100 million in assets. Once I bring on 500 million assets. Once I have 200 clients, right? Whatever that number is you're throwing out there, then I have time is a someday I'll. That's what you're
Yeah.
saying. Because really, what we see in reality, I mean, that's a great theory, but in reality, what we see is where you're sitting now. Unless you're going to do something different, that is a moving needle.
Mhm.
So if you say, great, once I bring on 100 households, once I bring on 200 households, once I hit 200 million in AUM, then I'll do something different. The problem is when you get to 180 million in AUM, you then make that number 250, right? Then 500, and it's a moving target. And you're going to say, no, 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 that's not the case. Well, that is the case in reality with 99% of people. So Jarvis, if that's the
Mhm.
issue, what's the solution to get around that?
Yeah, yeah, it is. And Mike, I'm actually going to pick apart your example here just a tiny bit, which
Please.
is it is a moving target. What also tends to happen is you'll never actually get to that target. And Mike, you and I were talking to a great young advisor recently, and he needed to block out time to record videos for part of his marketing strategy. And he says, Jarvis, I can't find any time, which is, of course, Dan Sullivan's quote, "You'll never find time, you can only make time." And then, Mike, we walked him through our kind of I don't call it famous, but our tried and true method of where is your time going currently? And we've talked about this a lot on the podcast, right? Let's just map out just for your work days, where is your time going? Unless you have, I'm trying to think of the number, unless you have 600 or 700 clients, almost everyone has 1,000 or more unaccounted hours in their work year.
Jarvis, I would say even with 6 or 700 clients, because you're not seeing all those clients all the time, right? When we meet with advisors that have 600 clients, you have 100 to 200 that you're going to meet with, and all the rest are ad hoc as needed when they're calling in. So I have never
Mhm.
come across an advisor where we could not find 1,000 hours. That's half the year, right? 1,000 hours of unaccounted time. Now, you're going to say, well, I am busy all the time and I'm working and I get up in the morning and I'm
Yeah.
working until 6 o'clock at night. And I'm not disputing that. You probably absolutely are, but the vast majority of that time is playing office, right? And when we have to look at ourselves and really say, well, I'm just slacking off and doing busy work. I'm petting my spreadsheets and
Mhm.
I'm adjusting my numbers, right? Which totally
Yes.
guilty of right over here. I will live in Excel for a long period of time because I get a lot of satisfaction out of that, but it doesn't move the needle with anything. That's just avoidance behavior or playing office.
Yep. Now I know that there are some listeners who are saying, "But Matt, but Micah, my situation is different," right? And for those people, go back through. We've done podcast episodes on finding out where your time has gone. Fill that exercise out, and then reach out to us and we can talk about if by chance you have this different scenario. Odds are 99% of our listeners, 99% of the industry of the entire world has this enormous amount of time. And by the way, Micah, we were just now talking about your time in the office. A good friend of mine, a mentor from many years ago, he would ask me, he says, Jarvis, what do you do with your third 8 hours of the day? I said, what do you mean my third 8 hours? He said, let's assume that you sleep for 8 hours, that you work for 8 hours. What happens to the other 8 hours of the day? Oh, shoot, what does happen to that other 8 hours? So there's this enormous amount of time. And of course, Mike, as we always like to say, everyone has the same amount of time, right? Elon Musk is putting rockets on Mars in the same amount of time that you and I are running relatively
Yep.
small practices by his scheme. So the time is there.
Jarvis, one of the things that I love about, actually, my daughter asked me about this the other night. One of the things that I love to say is we all have the same amount of time. Now, that's not a life expectancy thing, right? Who knows on that one? But every single one of us has 24 hours in the day, no more, no less. Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Matthew
Yeah.
Jarvis, right? All have the same 24 hours in the day. And so I look at this and it's a very empowering thing for me because I can say, great, if Elon Musk is working rocket ships to Mars with his 24 hours, what can I do with mine? It's not like he has 26, 27, 28 hours in the day and he magically has this time portal in order to make more time, right? He's being highly effective with the time that he has,
Mhm.
the same 24 hours that I have today. So, one of the things that you really have to ask yourselves is playing office, what is it costing you? Right? Not just on the office standpoint, but Jarvis, maybe I can bring up the family standpoint. What is it costing with your family time that's there? Because if I looked at the average advisor,
Mhm.
average successful
Yes.
advisor, right?
Yes.
I'm going to
Top
discount half the
quartile.
industry
Yeah.
that's not productive, right? I'm only going to take the top 50% of advisors that are out there. You are in your office 5 hours a day more than you need to be on
Mhm.
average. Jarvis, that's pretty aggressive. Would you think that's, push back on me on that?
No, I don't think it's aggressive at all. I think when we do this time exercise, right, number of clients times the number of hours each client takes you through the year, and then again we come up with this thousand of unaccounted hours. It's very true, and I think what I want to dive into is trying to get our minds around. Hey, about half of my day or 5 of my 8 hours a day are just wasted away. That's a hard one to get our minds around, even though it's true. Let's pivot just a little bit. Let's say that we just want to create 2 more hours a week. 2 more hours a week. This is again an exercise we did with an advisor the other day. For him, we painted through, and Mike, you said, how much is that time worth? So for him, we said, great, if you do this exercise 2 hours a week, every week for the next couple of years, how much revenue can that generate? And we had factored it out. In his case, it was going to be $250,000 of net revenue. So he said, great,
Wow.
each one of these 2 hour blocks has got to be worth $2,500 to you. Now, I'm buzzing through the math, Micah, but we've got to your point, say, all right, I need to block out X time. What is that time really worth? Or alternatively, what is it costing me by not blocking out that time?
And this is one of those things too that sometimes it comes up in my own world, right? Jarvis, I won't speak for you, but for me, that I get a lot of stuff on my plate all of a sudden just because we're running multiple
Yes.
companies, right? And so now we're running multiple companies, and I can easily play the card. Oh my gosh, I'm running all these multiple companies. I'm doing all this other stuff. Clearly I don't have enough time to do things. So whoa, I got to hit the pause button. That's head trash.
Yeah.
I have to get all my stuff done in the morning. This is self-imposed. I get all my stuff done in the morning outside of Surge so I can go spend time with my family because there's a cost there. And this is also super empowering because we're employing Parkinson's law.
Yes.
Things take as long as we allow them to
Yeah.
take. So back to this recording example that you gave this other advisor, right? He had to make time in his
Mhm.
calendar to go and do that. Then it was the aspect of saying, okay, great, this is the only time in which you can do recordings. You have to limit that time in that activity. Why? Because it'll take as long as you as much time as you have allotted is how long that activity is going to take. So Jarvis, in that
Mhm.
example, if you had told that advisor to go and say, hey, pick 8 hours to go do recordings, guess how long recordings would have done?
8 hours, yeah. Or actually,
And they would have
yeah,
been
it would have
crap.
been crap. I was gonna say he would spend 8 hours and not get anything done. It's not specific to him, he's probably listening.
No.
It's to all of us, right? It's to all of us.
Yes. Yeah, so you got to be hyper focused with that, right? You have to give yourself just enough time where you have to push yourself to get things done.
Mhm.
If you give plenty of time, you're going to slack off, you're going to postpone, you're going to do other things and you're not going to be productive. So that's a hack in time blocking is you give yourself just enough time where it's possible to get done but stressful to get done.
Mhm.
If you give yourself too much time, it'll blow up in your face.
So, Mike, let's say that we've agreed to this 2 hour block each week. Now, that 2 hour block, it may be to record podcast, it might be to call centers of influence, it might be to call prospects, it might even be to study
Perfect.
for your CFP exam. Whatever that 2 hour block is for, the universe whatever higher power you ascribe to is going to test your conviction on that 2 hour block. And they're going to test it in the form of, Micah, tell me if I'm off here. They're going to test it in the form of your top client calling, your office calling, your spouse calling, your kids calling, you coming down sick, and probably like something in the emergency broadcast network is going to come out all during that 2 hour block.
That is correct. There's a tsunami, a tornado, and a lightning storm directly above your house at the same time, right? That's what's taking place here. So one of the things with that, and I like to say, in Jarvis, you're 100% correct. This happens. So let's step back into something we can all relate
Mm.
to: an airplane ride. When you get on an airplane, right? Your office really can't call you.
Yeah.
Right, then now you could be on in flight and they could text you, sure, there's something like that, let's go with that one, right? But let's say you weren't on go-go, the plane didn't have it, like the plane one I just got off of didn't have internet on that flight service, perfect. Well, then guess what? Nobody could communicate me with it in that 3 hours it took me to get back to Alaska, and when I landed, everything was fine, right? So if I can fly somewhere for 3 hours, that's a scheduled event on my calendar, and the world continues to go, and I didn't lose any clients. And if somebody called, a message took place, and I have my communication plan, then what's the difference in that and you blocking out 2 hours to go do
Mhm.
podcasts, center of influence, these other things, putting your phone on airplane mode, not even D&D, putting it
Mhm.
on airplane mode, just like it was if you were flying. And now all of a sudden you magically have this time, and when that time is up, perfect. You take, just like you landed, you take your phone off airplane mode and you deal with the issues that have come up.
I love it. I was, as you're giving that example, I was thinking, well, I've never had a client or my team call me in the middle of the night. I think maybe once in my career, right? So 8 hours goes
Yeah,
by, maybe seven, where nobody talks to me, right? So it's totally possible. So you're blocking out this 2 hours. Let's say it's on a Friday to 10 to noon, just for conversation's sake. You
sure.
want to gather all these forces that could interrupt you, well meaning forces. We want to gather them in your favor. Right. So you're going to go to your team and say, hey, I heard this crazy idea from Matt and Mike. It's probably a bad plan, but for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to try blocking out 10 to noon each day so that I can get a couple of projects taken care of. But I want to, and you want to empower them, right? Because they've just sacrificed 2 hours of access to you. Hey, I want to make
That's
sure
right.
that the day before or that morning we have a quick check-in so that you've got everything you need. That way you feel at peace that I've got this focus time, right? So we're going to them saying,
Boy.
how do I empower you? How do I make this a benefit to you, not a burden?
In another way to phrase this, Jarvis, if I may, this is going from a very selfish act.
Mhm.
I'm going to take 2 hours away to go do my. Now, you could say this is marketing helps the firm, blah, blah, blah. All right, whatever, throw that away.
Mhm.
This is 2 hours just for you. And you've gone back to say, how do I help you become better at your job so I'm not hindering you,
Mhm.
right? This comes to a selfless act, being able to help these other people, your other team members. Now, this could be family, right? This could
Mhm.
be spousal
Yes.
time that you got to help out a little bit more around the house. You got to juggle a calendar in order to make sure something gets done. This could be the RMs. This could be the ops people. This could be a client meetings, right? All of these other things. Great. How are you proactive in those events to help these people in your life to make it so you guys can all succeed?
Yeah. Now, this advisor that we were talking to, has got some unique family situations. So he says, I don't know if 10 to noon would work because of this unique family situation. Perfect. How about 5 to 7 a.m.? How about 9 p.m. to 11 p.m.? It does not have to be 10 to noon. I just threw out that time, but we need to look and say,
Right.
when am I most reliable for honoring this commitment of blocking this time out? There's countless stories in the world of people who wrote books and they would get up every morning at 4 a.m. and they would write from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. before they went and worked their 12-hour shift. This can be done. We've got to just set ourselves up for success. If you know that you're totally unreliable and your brain doesn't work from 3 to 5 p.m. in the afternoon, don't schedule it then.
Yeah, I don't do my recordings that late, right? It's just not productive for me. But Jarvis, this is a really important thing I want to pull out that you just said. So often when we go through this with exercise, we lead with the no,
Yes.
right? Because the other people can see the answer is so clear, but our own pain is the only reality we have. And it's so painful between 10 and noon won't work. Now, we just threw across that there's 22 other hours in the day, right? That it could work. We just picked a 2 hour segment. So when you're working through this and you come up with X, just say, great, pretend this time works. What if it could? And if reality comes that 10 to noon doesn't work, perfect. Move that 2 hour slot.
Mhm.
Don't get hung up in saying it has to be this particular time. The goal is to make that time happen. But again, you have to empower your team. You have to empower your family to make sure you have that time. So you've got to pivot it to the AM, to the PM.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter. The essence is the same. You have to block out that time and be able to get it done.
Yeah. Michael, it'd be great to give some specific examples. And I know that when you're outside of Surge, you've got some really specific scheduling. A couple examples. This podcast, right? You and I meet every Monday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific, 7 a.m. Alaska. And that's when we get together. We do our brainstorming for TPR. And then we record this podcast. Why? What's the time that we're most reliable for? It works. I don't want to speak for you, Micah. For me, I haven't gotten my brain going on anything else. So I can wake up in the morning as I'm brushing my teeth. I'm thinking about the TBR podcast. We do the podcast, it's done, and then I can pivot to the next thing. Where other tasks, I used to volunteer in my kids' school all the time. And I realized I don't like volunteering on Monday because I kind of felt this lack of success, like I haven't gotten anything done. Same reason I don't work out well. That's one of the reasons I don't work out in the morning. I need to get straight to accomplishment. These other things don't feel to me, in my mind, in my head trash, like accomplishment.
It does. I feel like there's so much on my plate. I feel like I'm overworked, I'm overwhelmed, and I haven't done
Yep.
anything. So really productive. Now, one of the things for me going into Monday mornings is I have to make sure all my other stuff for the other companies that we
Mhm.
run is off the plate, right? If I come into this podcast and I'm thinking about one of the other companies, I'm thinking about Shalansky stuff, thinking about a client stuff, I am not really giving this my full attention. So that means Thursday and Friday, I got to be proactive in making sure I'm getting everything on my list done. So I go into the weekend with a clear conscience and I go into Monday morning with nothing looming over my head. This was that same thing, being proactive with my team to make sure we're all in a really good place. Another example that I like to use is we homeschool our kids, as most of our audience knows. So that means around now, my wife's changing the schedule up a little bit, but somewhere between 10 and 11 every morning, they're done with the homeschooling. Perfect. Now I want to be there with my family. Okay, great. So my time was always 10 a.m. By 10 a.m., I wanted to be done. Really, what the goal is not 10 a.m. It's once the kids are done with school, I want to be with the family for the rest of the
Yep.
day. So what time is that? And then I work all my stuff on around that. Amazingly, right? I can get a lot of things done in 2 to 3 hours every single day of highly focused, highly productive time because I have that hard stop. I want to spend time with my family.
I love that. So, Micah, some advisors are really cued into that, right? When they're most effective. We have advisor friends that don't go to the office until 10 o'clock because they want to drop their kids off and go work out before they go to the office. I have
That's
other
right.
advisor friends that only work late at night, right? So there's some things that were really reliable for figuring out what about if you do this time blocking and you've tried a bunch of different times and you're just still not reliable, you're still getting interrupted, you're still at the end of the day playing office during this time that was dedicated to do something productive.
Well, this is where extreme accountability comes in,
Mhm.
right? Extreme accountability is the tool we pull off the shelf when we need a little bit of help doing things we should be doing. For example, I don't need extreme accountability with putting pants on every single day. I'm generally pretty good about not leaving the house naked, right? At least for decades.
Yes.
I've been good with that. So, with that in mind, you don't need it for everything, but the things that says, you know what? I'm just gonna slip. I don't have enough dedication. I don't have enough focus. I'm gonna create excuses. And by the way, we all have these areas
Mhm.
in our lives. Perfect. This is when we bring in our extreme accountability partner and we come up, they come up, I should say, with what your extreme accountability is. So, example of this is say, great, you need to spend X amount of time working out. You need to spend this much time on personal development. You need to spend this much time in marketing and COIs every single week. And so it's great. This is the time that you have to spend. You always put a little buffer in there. So,
Yes.
normally, what we're going to say with that, if there's 4 weeks in a month,
Mhm.
you say you got to do it for 3 of those weeks because life does happen and we want this built on
Mhm.
success. Okay, for 3 weeks a month, this is you have to spend at least 2 hours doing COI calls per week. You have to do 2 hours of podcast, two
Mhm.
hours of content recording, 2 hours of article writing, whatever that is, you have to spend that 2 hours. Great news if you don't, you just got to send a check for X to your least favorite charity with a love letter that says you love the wonderful work that they do. This is the first of many contributions. And please send a giant sign to put in your yard. And here's a list of all your friends that completely disagree with their position, but they'd love to hear from you, right? You start putting accountability in like that. And Jarvis, all of a sudden, this becomes a little bit more compelling.
Yeah, and for all of our listeners that have gone through extreme accountability with us, and Mike, at
Oh,
this point,
yeah.
it's got to be hundreds. They're all nodding. They're saying, "Oh, yeah, that's the truth." And for those of you that haven't done it, you're probably thinking, "What? What in the heck is this?" But I got to tell you, every time we've done it, including earlier this week, it has been life changing for advisors. Now, Mike, a couple other things I want to point out as you're getting this 2 hour block. Know what your distractions are. Know what your distractions are. And this came up for
Mm,
me yesterday. I was flying back from Los Angeles with my brother Steven from Retirement Tax Services. And he looks over and he sees me scrolling through the Wall Street Journal headlines. As longtime listeners know, I'm a compulsive Wall Street Journal reader. And so I had years ago canceled my subscription so that I can only spend as much time as it takes me to read the headlines. So I can't get to the articles, right? But for you, it might be playing around on your computer. If that's the case, let's say you're doing centers of influence calls. Mike, and we know a lot of advisors are guilty of this, and
perfect.
you find yourself spending 30 minutes in the CRM for each one of these because you've got to research whatever you said to them 7 years ago. So instead, the day before, I would physically print the list of COIs I need to call with their telephone number so that when it comes time to call, I've got my phone and I've got my list, and that's it. Because I know that the internet or the computer will distract me.
And one of the things you could do, turn your computer off.
Yes,
And it's going to sound crazy, not on sleep, turn it
completely off.
off during these calls. Because what's coming in your computer that you're going to do? You're either going to play and get distracted in your email, you're going to be looking at IM. Now you can say, oh, I have to schedule something. You shouldn't be doing scheduling anyways, right? So there should be systems in place. When you make a phone call, you should not need your computer for these COI calls.
Mhm.
I love that idea. Put it on paper in front of you, go through the list, have that egg timer running so you can say, great, this is my 2 hours in order to get all of these calls done.
Yeah, it's really critical and it's easy to get caught, especially around time management, similar with working out or diet and exercise, all these things. It's easy to get caught in the shoulds. Hey, I should be able to focus. I should be able to make that time. I should get these prospecting calls done. But as we always say, Micah, if willpower were enough, we wouldn't be having this discussion. And that's where we back out and say, great, shoulds aside, maybe I should, maybe not. Here's what I'm going to do to set myself up for success.
And that's really the key thing, right? Is not about beating yourself up because you should be able to do something. It's about great. What are the rules of the game, and how do I gear this game to its my advantage, right? If I relied the whole thing on what I should be doing, I wouldn't nearly have as much success as I've had. It's been a lot around extreme accountability, hard press forcing mechanisms. So we could argue it says, you know what, I shouldn't have had to do that to myself. Okay, fair, but it worked. And so do what works. That's another huge
Mhm.
tenet of the perfect RA is do what works. So one of these things is you got to set these rules up. You got to play the game where you have the biggest advantage to win.
Yeah. On that note of do what works, in general, but specifically during this time block time, really love the idea of having a vision board or a success board, right? To remind yourself,
Ooh, yeah.
why am I doing this? Why am I doing it? Because let's use podcasts as an example. Those of us that do any kind of creative process, writing, podcast, videos, we've all had the experience on a regular basis where it's time to hit record and we can't think of a darn thing to say. Not a single thing to say, right? And it's gonna be hard and it's gonna be frustrating. And Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art, is a great reference guide for that, but have a visualization. What is this ultimately going to be? Yes, this 2 hour session itself probably means nothing, but they build on each other. And this is where we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue. We're talking about quality relationship with your family. We're talking about your physical health. Yes, you could skip that one session and on its own, it doesn't mean much, but it cascades.
Once you break it once, it's so, and this is the reason extreme accountability is so extreme,
Yes.
because if it was just $100, and say, oh, that wasn't that bad. Now you're used to breaking that system. If your extreme accountability is, if your income's around 100 grand, if all of a sudden we say your extreme accountability is $8,000 every time you break it, ooh, that's a big check.
Yeah.
Right now, all of a sudden, it's so much more compelling of saying, nope, I really have to get this done because my buddy over here has a check written out to this charity for $8,000 and he will mail it if I don't produce this, right? I mean, that all of a sudden is that compelling reason I have to get these things done.
Michael, what do you think are symptoms or cues, if you will, of the playing office, right? Because this comes into, I know that there's advisors listening, and I know that sometimes I listen to these things and I say, I've got
Right.
time management dialed in. Don't you know I've been on the Kitses podcast twice? Don't you know I'm running three different companies? Don't you know that I take 6 months after? I have time management dialed in. But then, Micah, you and I were meeting with a coach last week, a gentleman, Aaron Walker, and he bloodied our noses saying, yeah, you guys think
Oh,
you've got it
yeah.
figured out, but you're not even scratching the surface of what's
You're just
possible.
lazy.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, he called us lazy and selfish. So it was a great weekend,
it's great.
but
Yeah.
it was really impactful to spend time with him. So this is one of those. Now I'm having flashbacks of the weekend. I'm not even thinking about your question.
No,
Sorry
no,
about
it's
that. Got me
okay.
sidetracked. But these are really important things about when we're playing office to notice them. So for me, if I'm in Excel, because I'm a bit of a geek, right? I love technology. I love those other things. I have to give them a space to live in. But if all of a sudden I'm playing around in a spreadsheet for any more than to look up one number, that's it,
Mhm,
and to move on, I'm playing Office, right? If I'm researching something, I am playing Office. Now, we could say, well, I have to research this for a tax client or this complicated thing. Okay, great. That goes into your prep time, your
mhm.
planning time for a
Yep,
client with an egg timer.
yep.
That's when you get this done, right? So if all of a sudden I start scrolling through email, so anytime I'm scrolling, that is a dead giveaway that I am totally playing
Oh,
Office
totally.
because I'm just going through something, right? So almost what that boils down to is anytime you're on the computer, not directly looking something up, you are playing Office.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, anytime you're checking email, and those things just
Yep.
all need a place to live. It's not to say these aren't critical tasks, right? This is not to say that learning isn't critical, that research, that I don't put email on the list, but all these things are critical. They just have to have a place to live. Now, this has been known anecdotally forever, right? Dale Carnegie talked about it 100 years ago,
Oh
but
yeah.
it was documented again recently in the books Deep Work and other similar things, saying there's a lot of science behind this. The real difference between top producers or highly productive people and the rest of the people, Micah, to your point, is not that they have more time. It's just that they're pushing, they're compartmentalizing. During this block of time, I will do X, and anything else will have to wait till the next block of time.
The other thing that comes to mind a little bit, Jarvis, in playing office is we have a tendency to think something has to be perfect, right?
Yes.
I got to write the perfect email. I have to write the perfect answer. I have to have the perfect letter. And we spend so much time on this perfection, right? I won't start marketing until it's perfect. I won't send this article out until it's perfect. I won't release this video until it's perfect. Well, I don't know about you, but I've never done anything perfectly.
Mhm.
So, with that in mind, if I'd had that attitude, I never would have started with anything going forward. It has to be more than acceptable. It has to
Mhm.
deliver massive value. So, yes, it has to meet those requirements, but that's a far cry from perfection. And say, great, does this accomplish the goal in which it's intended to? Awesome, send it out and move on. So don't strive for perfection, strive for massive value delivering it to clients. And those are two different things.
Boy, Micah, so many roots come off of this. One is I've been doing, I know you have as well, been doing one-on-one calls with our Invictus members. And as we're talking about
Yeah.
content creation, this is kind of a tired cliche, but the idea of writing for the garbage can, right? Record that podcast, even if you're going to delete it. Write that article, even if you're going to delete it. Record that video, even if you're going to delete it. Just even go in. When I was recording the audiobook for the audio for my audiobook, I just said, great, I'm going to assume that each session is going to be garbage and they're just going to delete it, but I'm still going to use it as strictly as practice, and there was only one session that they went back and cut things back up from. Now, with that said, you are not a reliable judge, Micah, to your point about perfection, if it's good. You need to have somebody else that can go back and say, actually, you know what? That was really great. Yes, it's not perfect. Yep, it's not going to make it on HBO tonight. However, it's great. It's better than two-thirds of advisors. Let's get this content out.
So you need someone who's going to be honest with you,
Mhm.
right? And you need someone that understands where you're going. That's not a spouse.
Yes.
That doesn't help in that relationship,
Mhm.
right? So this is definitely a team member. This is definitely a colleague, maybe another advisor that you can help out with this. But I think that's great. And Jarvis, one of the other things that you said about recording the audiobook that I love about writing for the trash can, all of a sudden it takes the pressure
It
off,
does.
right? Instead of saying, "Oh my gosh, I have to get everything quite perfect and right, and I'm focused on all this other stuff," says, "Yeah, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to read this. I'm going to have some fun. I'm going to learn a little bit, and it's a total practice session, so it doesn't matter." Now, the trick that people will get into, I'm sorry, the trap people will get into is they'll think it's a practice session, so they won't show up.
Mm.
They won't do everything they need to do. No, no, no. This is a dress rehearsal, right? So you're still showing up and putting energy into it. There's just no audience that's there. So you're still putting the same commitment into it. You just don't have that audience pressure that's going to be there. And it's amazing once that goes away, how much wonderful things we can create and do.
Oh, I love it, Mike. I love it. Yeah, this is. It seems time management always seems like this just throwaway, cliched thing, but it really makes all of the difference in your practice. At the end of the day, this is really what separates the top advisors from everyone else. Now, this podcast is, of course, about taking action. Right? It's all about the things that you implement. In fact, actually, Mike, now I've become so attuned to things having action steps that when I get to the end of a podcast or a webinar or someone's presentation and there's not action items, I really feel robbed. I think, wait a
I
second, did you
do.
did you forget this last part? Like, gee whiz doesn't help. So, action items, I'm going to add this one to the list at the beginning. If you're doing any kind of content creation, Mike, to your point, you need to have a sounding board. You need to have a group to which that can review that and give you constructive feedback, not your spouse, not your office manager. For our Backstage Pass and Invictus members, post it to the forum, right? The forum is a great place to say,
Brilliant.
hey, would you mind taking a listen to this podcast? Would you mind taking a glance at this? Now, please do not post a 4-hour video and expect that we're all going to go through and watch it. This is where small snippets, but go to the forum, post, hey, here's a newsletter I'm working on. I'd love constructive feedback.
That's perfect. And when Yeah, that's perfect. You put it in the forum, put the snippets there, what your highlights are. Absolutely, I would love it. I'm going to say the second action item for us, Jarvis, is to go through the timeline calendar
Mhm.
exercise, right? Where you can actually go through, like Jarvis and I say, most advisors, every advisor we've ever met has at least 1,000 hours of unaccounted time,
Mhm.
and you're probably in your mind somewhere saying that's a bunch of BS. Go through the exercise, right? Email lifestyle at theperfectria.com. We have a time blocking series. Go through that exercise and really find out how much time you actually have.
Yeah, and by the way, if you go through that exercise or you're doing it mentally and you say, "Well, it's not 1,000," great, cut it in half. Cut it in a tenth. Let's say it's just 100 hours.
R-
That's 2 hours
Right.
a week. So even if you say, "Oh, no, not 1,000. I'm way more productive than what Matt and Micah think." Cool. Let's say it's 1/10. That's still 100 hours a year that you can't account for that could be converted into productive time.
Or family time, whatever version of production you want. I love it.
Yeah. I would say another action item, Micah, as you mentioned, email lifestyle, the perfect RA. We have available for the entire nation a series of time blocking videos that Micah, you and I recorded a little while ago. Very great information on surge meetings, on how we run our surge calendars, on how to get your time more productive. And that's how we get to this incredible amounts of time off that we've talked about on a regular basis on the show.
And then the last action item that I would say, well, actually 2 more.
Please.
One of the last action items that I would say is book on your calendar a forcing mechanism,
Mhm.
right? Again, what we're talking about is compressing that time so it's just enough where it's a little bit of stressful, but you have time to get things done. And then create an event, a third party event that you're accountable to. Going out to dinner with friends, going and picking your kids
Mhm.
up, taking your spouse out on a date, right? Some hard forcing mechanism that you have to leave that activity for, but you have to get it done before you leave. And you're going to find out it's amazing the things that you can get done.
I love
And
it.
of course, our last action item, I don't know why I say this for last. We should just start the podcast with this. 5 stars on iTunes would be absolutely phenomenal because you know if you made it this far, you just love this podcast. Send it out to your friends. We're growing with some ambitious growth goals of spreading the surge meetings, the time blocking, all of
Mhm.
these essence of the perfect RA. We really want to spread across the nation because we're seeing the impactful difference that it makes in advisor lives and in client lives.
I love it, Micah. Well, until next time, happy planning.
Happy planning.